taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge till I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha to benefit, transmigrate all sentient beings.
Right, well, welcome everyone to the third session, I think, of this reading, really, of Geshe Chekawa's commentary on Geshe Langri Tampa's 8 verses of mind training. So this follows in the tradition of the Kadampa core training, and they're really their main treatises, their main practices really follow both mind training and Lamrim. And within Lamrim, of course, Atisha composed the Bodhipata Pradipam, which really sets out the practice in terms of the 3 scopes of being, the small, medium, and the great aspirational scope. And it's especially the great scope practices that we're looking at in mind training, because mind training is essentially the teachings on how to generate bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment, or great compassion, because great compassion is the cause of bodhicitta. And within the causes to bodhicitta, they're generally given as the 6 causes and 1 result, and exchanging self for other. 6 causes and 1 result are the list of conditions required in order to generate the mind of enlightenment, starting with equanimity and so forth, going through great love, great compassion, on to generating the mind of enlightenment itself. And the mind of enlightenment, just roughly, it has 2 focal objects, that is the state of enlightenment and all sentient beings. And it's the aspiration associated with the mind of enlightenment to attain enlightenment oneself in order to benefit all sentient beings to the fullest possible extent. So that type of mind is the gateway to the great vehicle. So it's the entry point by which one becomes a bodhisattva. As soon as one has bodhicitta, which is this aspiration day and night at all times to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, as comes up, for instance, in the Abhisamayalankara, the awakening mind is the desire to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So the whole of the Lojong enterprise or project is to generate this internally through the 6 causes, 1 result, and through exchanging self for others. In the 8 verses, we're mainly looking at exchanging self for others, which is a quintessential technique to enter the great vehicle, to take on the basic responsibility of a being in relation to all other beings. And often it's said that there's just one final vehicle, and that is the great vehicle. So in a sense, that tells us that the final destiny, the final achievement of all beings is to achieve bodhicitta, and on that basis attain enlightenment. And by doing that, one fulfills one's potential as a human being or as any type of being. So we're looking at the 8 verses, and to date we've done the first verse. So I'll just quickly read the first verse just to remind us of the advice of Geshe Tangpa. And in the first verse he says, with a wish to achieve the highest aim, which surpasses even a wish-fulfilling gem, I shall train myself to at all times cherish sentient beings as supreme. So here he's giving the introduction to the practice, really. So at all times we cherish other sentient beings, hold them as dear. That becomes the very basis of our practice, to see them as supreme. And in a sense, they're almost like a wish-fulfilling gem, because in relying upon them, we achieve the greatest development of our potential. And there's no other way of doing it. And the fact that we haven't awakened our potential so far is that we haven't really trained our mind to cherish sentient beings as supreme. Now, because there's lots of reasons why we don't do this, and that is we have lots of grudges, we could say, second thoughts about others, and we often blame other people for our limitations and our negative experiences and so forth. But what this first verse is really indicating to us, what it's suggesting to us, is that the old way of doing things is just not good enough. The old way, in fact, doesn't work. And because within Buddhism, the mind is said to be beginningless and endless, we've been plodding away at this what? Method in order to gain success in this life of, in a way, blaming others. So we have to think about this to some degree, because it's so deeply embedded in our habitual behavior that even though we're convinced that, compassion is a wonderful thing, in the next moment we're back to the old grudges, and as if that's, our only MO. It's the only way we can deal with our situation. So this first verse is extremely important. I shall train myself at all times to cherish sentient beings as supreme. So this is a huge step for us. And one of the reasons for memorizing these verses is so that we can bring it up at any time, day and night. The 3 times during the day, the 3 times during the night, when we should be examining our mind. And see just how far we have gotten with that instruction from Langri Tangpa, cherish sentient beings as supreme. And we also note that Geshe Chekawa, in the beginning of the text, he mentions that he memorized the verses, but he hadn't taken them to heart. And he complains to himself about not taking them to heart, that if he had, he would have been in a better position. But since he wasn't able to take them to heart, well, he's still struggling with all of these issues, dealing with the external world, other people mainly, grudges against these other people, and the habitual stream of maintaining these grudges as if the grudges were somehow valuable to us. But Geshe Chekawa's words are also helpful to us because they show just how deep the problem is. It's not something that one can really deal with all in one life in general. And it's a proof for reincarnation in the Pramanavartika, which says, you know, past life and future life must exist, for otherwise there'd be no possibility of generating great compassion, because it just takes that much time to generate, because the habit is so deep of going against great compassion. So the practice here that from the first verse that Geshe Langre Tampa is advising us to undertake is to see, cherish other beings as supreme. So we have train occurring, Jongwa, and that's mind training train. We see it in each of the root verses, or if it's not there directly, it's indirect. So this gives the actual practice. Our practice is to train. So train myself here, or train my mind to cherish sentient beings as supreme at all times, not just when we think about compassion, but as whenever the mind is active, when we're awake, and so on, we should cherish sentient beings as supreme. Right, now last week we started on verse number 2. So I'll just, on page 278. Now verse number 2 is, whenever I interact with others, I will view myself as inferior to all, and I will train myself to hold others superior from the depths of my heart. So again, this is a huge, weighty instruction. And again, when we look at our own mind stream and our own practice and just how we think and how our mind works, we see that we're still quite a way from approaching this instruction. Whenever I interact with others, I will view myself as inferior, and I will train, again, mind training. I train myself, I train my mind, so mind training, to hold others superior from the depths of my heart. Now, occasionally we're able to do this, but in general not. We tend to think that because we understand the word compassion and love and so forth, that they're actually at hand at all times, or active within our minds at all times. But no, they're not. Often it's the opposite. We hate others. We bear them grudges. We don't want them to be successful. All the rest of it. If we go through the 3 root poisons, and we go through the 6 poisons, the 5 poisons, if we go through the 20 branch afflictions, we see that many of them actually work against the generation of compassion and love. Many directly, many indirectly. And because they still arise within us, we can see that we haven't progressed very far. So here, Langre Tampa mentions, whenever I interact with others, I will view myself as inferior to all. Now, this means actually inferior, not just hypothetically inferior. It means they are better than me. And I will train myself to hold others superior from the depths of my heart. Others are superior. So it means we put ourselves at the very basis of the very lowest level of all. And we do it genuinely, not just a show, like as something that we can brag about to others, or something that will increase our status or whatever. I'm a genuine practitioner of mind training or whatever. In fact, all of this is just poison, really. In fact, we don't even recognize poison to be poison in our internal minds. If we did, we would have already overcome all poison. But we don't see poison as it is poison. We don't see the 9 tormented minds as tormented minds even. We tend to follow along behind them. We stoke them, we encourage them and follow them and so forth. So all of this leads away from the goal of bodhicitta, which is to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So we should keep verse 2 also in mind. So really verse 1, we're training to cherish sentient beings as supreme. And here we're training to see, to hold others as superior from the depths of our heart. So one is seeing sentient beings as supreme, and the other one is holding myself as inferior and others as superior. Now, we read through the commentary up to a certain point. Now, I'll just go to the top of page 279 and just start roughly there. Shantideva's Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life states, by this type of behavior, even a human form will not be obtained. If I fail to achieve human existence, there is only evil and no virtues. So what is this type of behavior? This type of behavior is just our normal behavior. In other words, it's reflecting on the current state of our mind. If we leave our mind pretty much in its current state, then even a human form for us is difficult to attain. If I fail to achieve a human existence, there is only evil and no virtues. So here again, this is Chekawa. Geshe Chekawa is trying to put this into context for us so that it is clear on how we should practice. So our normal behavior, which is full of pride and ignorance and attachment and anger, hatred, resentment, jealousy, and so on, even a human form will not be obtained. So again, the core practice is being mindful. It comes down to the mindfulness practice. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness: mindfulness of the physical body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of the mind itself, and mindfulness of phenomena. So mindfulness of the physical body is just looking at the basis which supports our consciousness. Our breath, for instance, which is a way, meditation on breath, which is to do with our lungs, taking in air and expelling that air, is a sign of the state of our consciousness. We have a physical sign there due to our breath. When we look at our breath, we can see whether we're relaxed or not, and so on. If we go to a slightly deeper level, then we look at our feelings. So our feelings are a very good barometer of our behavior. So we look at our positive, negative, neutral feeling and just observe that. Then the third object of mindfulness is the mind itself. So there we have, for instance, all the emotions, the afflicted emotions. So being aware of those, being aware of how they manifest, what is manifest in my mind stream at present. So emotional attraction and emotional repulsion are the 2 main ones for us. And we notice that during the day, we go from one to the other. Emotional attraction, is sort of bubbles along for a period, and then we have emotional repulsion. So we're repulsed by the objects that come to mind. Otherwise, we have emotional attraction, so attracted to objects that come to mind. So mindfulness of mind is being aware of these thoughts, emotional activity, and being just an observer of this. a neutral observer, just to see what's there, and so on. But when we go beyond that to the fourth object of mindfulness, which is Dharma, or which is phenomena in general, then we're looking at the Four Noble Truths and so on. And when we start looking at the Four Noble Truths, then we see that our path is really defined by the Four Noble Truths. We seek to obtain cessation and path and eliminate suffering and origin. And suffering and origin really are result and cause. The cause is origin, which is the afflictive emotions and karma. So in this verse, on Shantideva's verse here, mindfulness allows us to look at our behavior and our mental behavior, which is the cause of our physical behavior. So this we need to, and as part of our practice, become aware of, but to do it as an observer, as a clear observer, because we just want the facts of what's happening internally. Right. So then reading in the commentary beneath that, we'll just quickly go through this. In this manner, we should contemplate all our shortcomings and reflect, nothing falls beneath me but this river. So again, we're looking at ourselves as the lowest of all beings. So this helps with countering our pride. And we diminish our conceit and learn to respect others. So the logic here is that actually our negative emotions focused on others are often supported by pride, conceit, lack of respect. This we need to turn around. So in order to turn all this around, we need multiple strategies. So one of them is seeing myself as lowest or inferior to all. So this suggests that whenever we perceive positive qualities in others, we perceive qualities pertaining to family lineage, physical appearance, material resources, or spiritual realizations, such as the six perfections. And we should think how wondrous indeed they possess these qualities despite their flawed natures. So instead of actually having a negative opinion of others, we should look at the positive qualities of other beings and just think about those. Every being has at least one, if not multiple, positive qualities. We often don't know about them. We often don't look for them. We often doubt them if they're told to us. But here, the advice is, forget our habits and our tendencies. Here we must look at the positive, wonderful characteristics of other beings. But of course, this is just what we want other people to do to us as well. Forget about all our faults. Don't focus on them. Just keep in mind that I have the odd good quality. So do unto others as it is said. This so this advice here is very helpful and starts to attack, or it starts to undermine these negative habits that we have. So as the Chekawa then continues, if instead they lack these qualities, we should reflect, who knows what higher qualities they may actually possess. So here the story of the ugly mendicant is told. So I'll just quickly, it's downstream a bit. I'll just read out the first. There's the story of the repulsive mendicant, which is 31 of the 100 texts on mind training given in a great collection. So as it says here, once in India, among the beggars, a mendicant used to sit behind the doors of taverns and whenever drops fell on him from the tavern ladies spilling beer, he would utter, each on their own. At that time, proponents of the non-Buddhist schools had issued a challenge to debate, but no one who could rebuff their arguments could be found. No Buddhists could be found that were able to refute their assertions against the Buddhists. The tavern lady mentioned that a mendicant, a monk, behind her door would utter, each on their own, whenever drops of beer fell on him. So he was invited to debate. So the Buddhists are really in deep trouble here against the outsiders. And the disputants were refuted. Thus it is taught that as far as inner knowledge is concerned, you cannot determine who possesses what. So in other words, a person may look to be not learned or lacking in qualities and so on, but we can't take things on face value. And other stories are also given here. So the next story that's mentioned, I'll just mention that as well. There is also the story of a couple who were robbed but failed to notice at first. Feeling they could get by anyway, they let it pass. However, from that night onward, the looting got even worse. So it seems that just letting things pass is also not a way forward. That one has to be careful of all of these things so that the bad habit or the negative things stop happening to oneself. And the only way that can come about is by being mindful of the external and internal activity that one experiences. So a third one is given there, and this is pertinent to Atisha, and he says, Raja Sangha, a mendicant with an offensive character, met regularly with Atisha. When Atisha was requested by his disciples to stop seeing him, Atisha responded, it is in dependence on him that my practice of forbearance is being perfected. So Atisha had this rather prickly character in his retinue in order to train Atisha in patience. So we should try and practice on that level and see all of those that push our buttons as those that are going to perfect our training in patience and forbearance. And there's a further one. A rumor once circulated that Langri Tampa had transgressed the cardinal monastic precept of celibacy. So someone said that he'd been sleeping with someone, with a lady somewhere. Even though this was false, he nevertheless gave away his possessions. He made offerings of tea at Racheng Monastery and so on. So made an offering to the monastery and to all the monks, and then entered meditative retreat. And this is a supplement to the 8 verses. So when we're falsely accused of something, we should not get annoyed. We should make reparations, because even the false accusation is something that we can learn from. Because inevitably, if we could remember our past lives, we'd remember many instances where we've harmed others that we don't now recall. So to think that even in this life, if we're accused of a fault and we're not guilty of that fault, we don't have that fault, it's not quite true, because we have the karmic seeds for those faults. We have countless karmic seeds of having committed that action in the past that also need to be purified. And I'll just read this last verse on this page. This is a supplement to the 8 verses. Geshe Chekawa states, reverence for the objects of refuge is the support of the path. Purity of ethical precepts of your vows is the basis of the path. Contemplating life's absence of leisure is the most excellent path. So that's renunciation there. Contemplating life's absence of leisure, we never really get to rest. Why? That's the nature of our existence and everyone else's existence. We need to generate renunciation. We're never going to find, we shouldn't treat it as like a pleasure grove, as Shantideva says. We have to renounce it utterly, fully, completely. Without accepting loss, accepting loss without despair is the way of the renunciate. Accepting loss without despair. Wonderful words there. Just being able to accept the loss of something. We didn't get our way. We lost money. We were shown up in the circle of our friends as being a little bit stupid, a little bit forgetful, a bit this, a bit that. Accepting that loss without despair is the way of the renunciate. So we have to be renunciates here. So we'll go back. We won't go on to the next page there. So still continuing with verse number 2. So we're halfway down page 279 of Chekawa's commentary. From the depths, or the very bone of my heart, Ninru in Tibetan, Ninru, the bone of my heart, the Ninru. There's in Tibetan they say Ninru Tsapo. You have a hot bone heart. That's someone that puts a lot of effort into study. They might not be that intellectually gifted, but they persevere. Such a person is called Ninru Tsapo. Even in the monastery, we'd be saying to each other, we have to be Ninru Tsapo in this, don't have such a clear mind, don't have a gifted mind, so I have to be Ninru Tsapo, hot heart mind, hot heart bone. So it says here, from the depths of the very bone of my heart. So the bone of the heart means the inner heart itself. From the very depths of that indicates that our thoughts should not remain in our mouth or mere words. Instead, so going back to the root verse, from the depths of my heart, of the bone of my heart, our practice shouldn't remain as mere words. So this is talking directly at us because our practice is pretty much mere words at present. We know the word compassion, we know love, we know wisdom, we know emptiness, we may have memorized the 16 emptinesses, but our practices tend to be mere words. Instead, if we have the intention, I shall regard all beings as my family without discriminating on the basis of their family background, even the noble Avalokiteshvara will compliment us with the statement, "O child of noble family, this is excellent." So even if we have the genuine intention to really practice this from the depths of our heart, then Avalokiteshvara could actually single us out and say, well done. So just as when the earth is leveled, oceans form upon it and draw forth the waters. So just as when the earth is leveled, oceans form upon it and draw forth the waters, in the same manner, the supermundane qualities flourish in the hearts of those free of pride. Okay, so we've got to level our mind out and see that our pride is one of the 6 poisons. It's one of the 5 poisons, pride. So we need to level things out so we see everyone as equal. Therefore, the condensed perfection of wisdom states, abide as if you were a servant of all beings. So this is going a little bit beyond just seeing that all beings are equal. It's said in the condensed perfection of wisdom, we should practice, we should exist as if I was the servant of all beings. And in fact, it's often said, the Buddhas are the servants because they're having fulfilled their purpose, they come and make themselves available to give whatever teaching a being or beings are capable of understanding. So the ordinary beings are in the control seat, so to speak, because they're determining what the Buddhas can teach them. And so the Buddhas, with their infinite skill, act as if they're servants of all beings. So we should do the same now, because by training in mind in that now, then gradually this will come to be established. So in essence, the three scriptural collections are a means to vanquish that conceit. So the three scriptural collections, that is of Sutra, Vinaya, Abhidhamma, are the very means to overcome our conceit. And again, we still are not in a position to overcome it. We still hold to this self as existing, and we still hold that it's important that I have a high position, that I have respect, I have gain and respect, and so on. And much is said about the faults of gain and respect. So when we are conceited, we are unable to live in harmony with others, even in this present life. So again, another gem of advice. We don't live in harmony with others because of our conceit, our pride, our hubris, our arrogance also. For its detrimental consequences in the next life, it is said, some ignorant ones, owing to the force of their conceit, take birth in lower realms and in places bereft of leisure. They take birth as paupers and among the lowly castes. They become blind, weak, or possessed of a vile demeanor. So this is all due to conceit and pride. Next page, 280. Because of conceit, our propensities or our imprints for afflictions will deepen further, and we will generate intense afflictions relative to those we deem inferior to ourselves. There is even a consequence more serious than this. We will fail to attain enlightenment. So the current effect is our propensities or our latent predispositions or our imprints for afflictions will deepen. So this is going in the opposite direction that we want to go in. And we generate new afflictions that lay down further imprints relative to those who we deem inferior. So it's this horrible process that we know oh so well, but we don't notice it often until, the whole process is nearing completion, or we wonder why we're not in a good mood, or maybe we just don't notice anything, and it just becomes something that we need to distract ourselves from by watching something on TV or doing some shopping therapy or playing some sport. Or often we engage in distractions or distracted activities that we like in order to escape from the mind, the state of our mind and the heaviness of it. So by these practices, we will fail to attain enlightenment, but we shouldn't be surprised. We're still unenlightened, and we've existed from beginningless time. Also, it is written, the bodhisattva who is conceited remains far away from enlightenment. So even bodhisattvas can be conceited. And while they're conceited, they are far from enlightenment. Again, so all the states of inferiority, degeneration, and suffering within the bounds of mundane existence arise from grasping our own self as most precious. So all the states of inferiority, all degeneration, all suffering within the bounds of mundane existence, and there's really no boundary to mundane existence. There's no boundary to the universe. As far as we know, all we can see is the limit of what we can see according to the light arriving here from outer space. And the observable universe is probably smaller than the actual universe. So if it says here, all problematic states arise from grasping at our own self as most precious. So we have to take this to heart. We have to train the current heart, which is a bit like a rock and unyielding. We have to, as one of my teachers used to say, the mind is like an old shoe, an old dried up shoe that's been left outside in the weather for 20 years. We need to take the old shoe-like mind and apply the compassion of butter to that old shoe. So eventually the mind becomes more supple, pliable, usable. So at present, our mind is a bit like an old shoe that's dried up. It's a bit like a rock. It's just quite unmanageable. So in contrast, all the joys, both mundane and supermundane, originate from sentient beings. So all the joys are coming from sentient beings. We should therefore perceive all sentient beings as embodiments of higher qualities and vanquish our pride. So all sentient beings we should see as the embodiment of higher qualities. No matter how they actually look, they are higher qualities. They are precious. They are supreme. And I'm lowest of all here. And by putting myself as lowest at the very bottom rung of everything, that's a bit easier on that. It takes a bit of a weight off our mind. Here we have to really test this. By doing it, it vanquishes our pride. It's like, I remember reading about one Capuchin monk in one of the Catholic orders, who described the training of a monk as the necessary practices to mortify the pride, to mortify the pride. We have to actually mortify the pride, vanquish our pride, pierce it with through the heart by the sword of wisdom, destroy the pride in that way. So third, okay, now dealing with the third verse. Since the afflictions impede us from proceeding in the above manner, eliminate them as follows. So again, we're back to the afflictions. So for us, just having the word affliction is not enough. We should remember that there are 6 root afflictions and 20 branch afflictions, and we should know them. Because if we don't know that they're an affliction when they arise, there's no way we can eliminate them. But if we can't memorize all the 20 branch afflictions, which we should do, then we should know the root afflictions, because the branch afflictions emerge from the root affliction. Okay, so verse number 3. During all my activities, I will probe my mind, and as soon as affliction arises, since it endangers myself and others, I will train myself to confront it directly and avert it. So having reached this verse, verse 3, we begin to see the need to examine our mind, probe my mind. For what? To see what afflictions are there, what afflictive emotions are there. What are these? The afflictions are defined really as that which is uncomfortable, that which agitates, that which, when they arise, the mind is unsettled, the mind is not at peace, the mind is not pacified. So these are the afflictions. Klesha in Sanskrit also means to afflict. They're hard to bear. And when they've arisen in our mind, and they reside in the center of our mind, the mind becomes uncomfortable, agitated, unpeaceful. So we need to probe our mind to see where the areas of discomfort are. My mind actually should be in its natural state entirely blissful and light and uncontaminated by the afflictions. So as the root verse says, during all my activities, I will probe my mind, and as soon as an affliction arises, since it endangers myself and others, I will train myself to confront it directly and avert it. So the enemy, the actual enemy, is the internal afflictions. So we need to recognize them. We need to destroy them. We need to end them. Now, of course, we know this, but we know it only at a very superficial level. And the knowledge that we have that is on a very superficial level is not getting to the level of the afflictions. So we must, as recommended by Geshe Chekawa, take to heart this third verse. So Geshe Chekawa then gives his explanation. Training ourselves to examine our mental continuum or our mind stream in all our activities and averting the afflictions or stopping the afflictions as soon as they arise is as follows. Whichever of the 4 everyday activities, whenever we're engaged in any of the 4 types of activities. So this is basically standing up, sitting down, walking, lying down, or there's other ways that these are described. These are the 4 physical activities that a person can be engaged in. With mindfulness and vigilance, we should analyze whether the thoughts such as attachment arise in our mind. So whatever physically we're doing, in other words, regularly we should check up. With mindfulness and vigilance, or mindfulness and introspection, and analyze whether the thoughts such as attachment have arisen. With the thought, I will relinquish them the instant they arise. We should level them flat by observing them in this manner. Level them flat. Destroy them. They're the enemy. So we're allowed to destroy them. We're allowed to kill them. We're allowed to deal with them in the worst possible manner. Level them flat. So how do we do this? By observing them in the following manner. Instead, if we act like an elderly couple being robbed by a thief, we procrastinate and then nothing happens. So we're not, when the affliction arises internally, we're not going to be like granddad and grandma. You're sitting there, like pointing a walking stick at the affliction, at the thief that's just entered their house, but not being able to do much more. So we're called on to do much more than that. If afflictions proliferate in our mind stream, emotions like anger will increase exponentially. So this piece of information also is extremely important. If we don't deal with the anger when it arises, for instance, then it gets stronger. If we procrastinate when the mind is disturbed by the afflictions, if we procrastinate and think we can turn the other way, well, no matter which way we turn, it's still going to arise and arise more strongly within our mind stream. So this is calling for action instead of just being a passive observer. Our sutra states, likewise, those who place their faith in sleep will procrastinate and fall further into slumber. This is true for those who are lustful and those who crave intoxicants. So in other words, we can't place our faith in sleep. Of just, curling up in bed and using that as a technique to overcome the afflictions. There's a tendency if we just rely on sleep, providing we can get some sleep, that is just a sign of procrastination then. And we will fall further into the slumber of ignorance here. So the darkness of ignorance. So if we allow the afflictions to manifest in our mind stream unchallenged, then we fall further into the slumber of ignorance. This is true of those who are lustful. So also with the, we're talking about really delusion in the beginning or ignorance in the beginning, then attachment or lust, and those who crave intoxicants. So if we fall into those categories, then we have to be warned. Attachment is another thing that we have to be aware of, because the 12 links is really attachment oils the machinery of the 12 links that generate rebirth. So we want to get to the stage where we're not thrown into rebirth by attachment and ignorance, but we are able to enter rebirth by the power of our prayers as bodhisattvas. So then there is skill, there is wisdom in that type of entry to samsara. But not the normal way, not through lust or attachment and so forth, or through craving intoxicants. Our propensities or imprints for affliction will deepen, and we will experience intense afflictive emotions. Next page, 281. Toward all we perceive to be inferior. So again, this superior, inferior is an element of conceit or pride. So if we procrastinate, our imprints for the afflictions will increase, and we will experience intense afflictive emotions because of that. Our emotions will increase in their strength. And this is done towards all these beings who we regard as inferior, meaning we're looking at them with our pride. So on a basis of pride and ignorance, then also we generate the thought that they're inferior, they're our enemies, and so on and so forth. A more serious consequence is that we ourselves would experience acute suffering. If we relinquish the afflictions, their propensities or their imprints too will become lighter. The past propensities will weaken, and only subtle propensities or imprints will be created anew towards desirable objects. So here, Geshe Chekawa is talking about these imprints. So the imprints and the seeds that exist in our mind stream are vast. They're countless. They're not even physical entities. These imprints or propensities are non-physical but impermanent. And they exist within the mind itself, within the mental consciousness. And they accumulate there, and they remain there until they're purified or they're experienced. From the mind-only point of view, they exist in foundation consciousness. So we have this vast heritage of propensities or imprints. Some of them are white, some are black. And we are what? Susceptible to experiencing the outcomes of these propensities or imprints at any time, depending on causes and conditions. So this is places us in a position of vulnerability, and often, without any external condition necessarily arising, the mind becomes afflicted and unworkable through what? Through the activation of these propensities or these imprints or seeds within the mind stream. So we're not beyond that. So it's a danger for us. So as Geshe Chekawa says, since the law of cause and effect is subtle, the effects will definitely be realized in our experience. So law of cause and effect, here it's talking about the 12 links. So the 12 links are comprised of the truth of origin and the truth of suffering. And the truth of origin there we're dealing with basically ignorance and attachment, and then we're dealing with karma, which is formation, the second link, and then the 10th link, which is existence. So the law of cause and effect that's played out by the truth of origin, giving rise to the truth of suffering, is extremely subtle. But the outcomes are definite. So we should not expect to get beyond the effects of our past negative deeds until we actually become Arya beings. Then we really start to purify these karmic outcomes. At present, we're not Arya beings. We haven't attained the path of seeing. We're vulnerable. So we should examine the law of cause and effect and make sure the causes that we're producing are just positive white karma. So we should view the afflictions as our enemies and enhance the power of their antidotes. Shantideva says, I may be slain or burned alive. Likewise, I may be decapitated. Under no circumstances shall I bow before my enemy, the afflictions. So we should really see the afflictions as our enemy and not give an inch to that enemy. No matter what we're threatened with, being slain or burned alive, being decapitated, whatever circumstance, we will not submit to the afflictions. We will not give them breath. We won't give them any oxygen. We'll destroy them. At the same time, we take away this idea that other beings are our enemies and so forth. They're not our enemies, they're supreme. And they are the wish-fulfilling gem upon which I will attain the state of enlightenment. So we need to rearrange our habitual priorities, which tends to see other ordinary beings as our enemies. As stated here, now the commentary below, the conventional enemy can harm us only in this world. So an ordinary enemy can only harm us now as we're alive, and not beyond. Once we're passed from this world, they can't harm us. But the enemy that is our afflictions can injure us throughout all our lives. So bad things we did 1,000,000 lifetimes ago may still be there in the mix, in our present mind stream. But ordinary enemies, other beings, the external world, all those external to ourselves, they can't act in that way. So in comparison to the afflictions, they're hardly an enemy at all. They're not enemies at all. So it has been stated, this enemy of mine, the afflictions, is long-lived, with neither beginning nor end. No other enemies can endure in this manner for so long. So we have to identify the true enemy to us and to all other beings around us, what the true enemy is. Furthermore, when we concede to our conventional enemies, when we give in to them, they no longer harm us and they may actually benefit us. True, we have an enemy, but if we apologize, if I harmed you in any way, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have tried to harm you. Forgive me. We say that to our enemies. They'll say, oh, okay, yeah, well, it's half my fault anyway. And actually, suddenly we can talk and converse and they're friends again. They may actually benefit us. If we assuage the afflictions, if we concede to the afflictions, if we give in to them in the same manner, however, they become even more destructive. So this law is just a statement of how things are. We give in to them thinking they may not afflict us, but the affliction just becomes more intense. So there's no way forward with that technique, with that type of practice. So it has been stated, if you relate to your enemies with and with friendship and gifts, these bring benefit and happiness. However, if you appease the afflictions, it causes even more suffering and injury. Furthermore, conventional enemies harm only our body, life, and wealth, whereas the afflictions create immeasurable suffering in this cycle of existence. It has been stated, even if all the gods and demigods rise up against us as my enemies, they should not drag me down and cast me somewhere into the blazing fire of the eternal hells. So our ordinary external enemies can't cast us into the hells. Yet this powerful enemy, my afflictions, can fling me instantly where even mighty Mount Meru would be crushed into dust upon contact. So the external universe doesn't treat me as badly as these internal afflictions. But it's as if we've forgiven the afflictions and we're trying to suppress, we're trying to tame and bring into line and through force or whatever measure we can out the external universe. We've got it around the wrong way completely. Our external enemies are not that harmful. The internal enemies are limitlessly harmful. So we should view the afflictions as our enemy and discard them, while conventional enemies can return and cause harm even if they have been banished. The afflictions cannot resurface once they have been eradicated. It is like burnt seeds. The method for eliminating them is through conduct, meditation, and view. So another difference between them is that even though we might vanquish our external enemies once, they can move away and regroup and, produce more weapons and bring together more, a bigger group against us and attack us once again. But once the afflictions have been vanquished, that's it. They only need to be vanquished once. So the way of doing this depends on conduct, practice, and meditation, and view. For beginners, even the weakness of their antidotes and their difficulty in countering afflictions that have already arisen, they must relinquish them first through their conduct. So here we're going into an explanation of conduct, meditation, and view. So in terms of conduct for beginners, even the weakness of their antidotes and their difficulty in countering afflictions that have already arisen, in order to deal with those, they must relinquish them first through their conduct. So what does this mean? As for meditation, it is said that each affliction has a corresponding antidote. So meditation, they're talking about the antidotes to the different emotions, afflictive emotions. Since whatever meditative practice we undertake from among the three scopes of being becomes a remedy against all the afflictions, it is appropriate to engage in this practice. As our mental level advances, since the afflictions are devoid of objects, it is sufficient simply to recognize that this is so. Thus, there remains nothing to eliminate. So really, conduct first, practice like virtuous conduct and eliminate non-virtuous conduct. And meditation, by applying the antidotes to the different types of affliction. And that we practice in accordance with the three scopes. And those antidotes that are raised in the three scopes, we practice those, and it is appropriate to engage in this practice. For instance, in the highest scope, like the three aspects of the path, then we practice renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view from a Mahayana point of view. And that is sufficient for what practice we need. And as our mental level, as we improve internally through our practice, And because the afflictions are devoid of objects, so this is view here. If there is no truly existent object, all we need to do is, from the point of view, is to recognize that this is so, that the objects of our afflictions really do not truly exist. They are empty of existence, empty of true existence. They only have a nominal level of existence. So this, through generating proper conduct, then developing meditation on the antidotes. That meditation on the antidotes also applies antidotes to wrong view, the five afflicted views, such as the view of the perishable composite, extreme view, wrong view, the view holding those three views as supreme, and the view clinging to rules and rituals as supreme. All the afflicted views that are set out themselves are eliminated through proper meditation. So this encompasses the entire practice. Shantideva also states, afflictions, afflictions, relinquish them with your eyes of insight. So our eyes, or internal eyes, is insight, which is wisdom. So the only way we can relinquish the afflictions is through wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom is that which differentiates phenomena. Wisdom is the capacity to differentiate, for instance, what is virtue and non-virtue. So here we're looking to differentiate the afflictions from positive mental states that we do need, like love and compassion. And also we need view. We need wisdom that understands the objects of view, the view of the perishable composite, such as the personal self, does not exist. The self of phenomena does not exist. So these also are eliminated by insight, by wisdom, understanding emptiness and selflessness. So then fourth, training ourselves to regard beings of unpleasant character and those oppressed by powerful negative karma and suffering with special care, and as something really found, is presented in the following. So now we move to another type of training. So training in how to deal with beings of unpleasant character and how to deal with those oppressed by powerful negative karma and suffering, how to treat them with special care and as something really found. So amongst all the beings we have to deal with, potentially our external enemies, they are supreme gems. They are, as it comes in the first and second verses. But in particular, we're dealing with the difficult ones that we have to deal with, that really press all our own buttons, or a lot of them, or a few of them. How do we deal with that? So here we have verse number 4. When I encounter beings of unpleasant character and those oppressed by intense negative karma and suffering, as though finding a treasure of precious jewels, I will train myself to cherish them, for they are so rarely found. So again, this is really dealing with our deep-seated habits. We haven't dealt with them sufficiently in any of our lives previously. So this life is a life in which we should start to deal with these deep-seated habits while we have the opportunity to do so. So the commentary on this, beings of unpleasant character refers to those like the king Asanga, who, not having accumulated merit in the past, experience the rising of afflictions even without even a trace of control. So this king obviously was it's like a handful. If it also refers to beings such as the ill-tempered person who, while crossing a mountain pass, was given a plate of meat stew. But when the food burned his lips, he tossed the full plate away along with the pan, and then bellowed, "You dare burn me." So this must be a well-known story in Tibet. Intense negative karma refers to the 5 heinous crimes: degeneration of the vows, and misappropriation of offerings made to the 3 jewels. So just these things, intense negative karma, the 5 heinous crimes, such as injuring the Buddha, killing one's mother or father, killing an arahant, creating a schism, and lying about one's attainments. So there will certainly be intense negative karma. And otherwise, degeneration of the vows. So breaking the vows, not purifying them, and so forth. And misappropriation of offerings made to the 3 jewels. Using offerings made to the 3 jewels for our own purpose, for instance. Those oppressed by intense sufferings refers to those who are afflicted by leprosy, other serious illnesses, and so on. So here we have a brief definition of these terms from the root text. We should not treat them as enemies, these beings, by saying we cannot even look at them, and we must never allow them to come near us. Rather, we should feel compassion towards them as though they were being led away by the king's executioners. Even if some among them are morally degenerate, we should feel, what can I do to help them? Until our tears flow freely. This means that we should first console them with words. And if this proves ineffective, we should provide for their material needs and render help to cure their illness. If this too is unsuccessful, we should sustain them in our thoughts, and in our action, we should protect them even with shelter. Some people thinking, oh, this will not benefit the other, but it could harm me, cover their noses and walk away from the oppressed by acute suffering. Even so, there is no certainty that such suffering will never befall us. Therefore, in our actions, we should provide others with food, medicine, and the like. While with our thoughts, we should contemplate the following and train the mind. Whatever sufferings beings have, may they all ripen upon me. So those words are, we're advised by Geshe Chekawa, are words that we should practice. That when we find these other beings who are oppressed by their karma or their negative deeds, and they're suffering because of them, or just that they have a negative character that are hard to get on with, they're difficult people, that they never speak warmly or kindly about others, and so forth. You sit down with them for a while, and the mind starts to feel heavy because they're complaining about everything, and so on. So we should not think negatively of such beings. Instead, we should think, whatever sufferings beings have, may they ripen all upon me now. And of course, this is something that we have to train ourselves in until it gets to a genuine level. We can't simply verbalize the practice and agree with it on a verbal level. We have to live the practice. We have to be the practice. We have to accept the practice and see how it is the only, really the only way forward. Because all of these instructions that are given here are from that point of view, that they're only here because there's no alternative. We have to take upon ourselves these practices because they're dealing with actual faults that reside within us. And unless we engage in such practice, we're not going to eliminate these faults internally. So then the text goes on to say, the line, I will train myself to cherish them, for they are so rarely found, is explained as follows. Since it is rare to find a precious gem, we do not discard it, but rather keep it and cherish it. In the same way, beings of unpleasant character are not so easy to find, yet in dependence on them, compassion arises, and in dependence upon them, the awakening mind arises. Without making deliberate effort, it is rare to encounter such objects as these that allow us to develop the Mahayana paths. Why? Because compassion does not arise toward the noble ones and those with worldly excellence, so they cannot help us enhance the awakening mind. They therefore cannot help us, lead us to the attainment of Buddhahood. So this is also an extremely valid point, that we generate compassion only to those, or primarily to those, that are in suffering at present, and then by extension to those who have the causes and conditions for suffering, although they may not be suffering in the present. It is towards them that we can generate a genuine mind of compassion. So whenever we come across such beings, and of course we're coming across such beings all the time, then we have to generate this genuine concern for their welfare. Now, there probably are many different techniques and strategies that we can apply here, but basically one is seeking to manifest compassion, genuine compassion in one's mind stream. That, okay, it's going to be weak to begin with, but to increase the strength of this compassion more and more and more as one's practice continues. Because this is the gateway to the great vehicle. This is the gateway to enlightenment. There is no other method. One has to generate compassion for all sentient beings, even sentient beings who have realizations. But we start with those that are suffering most. And here, the advice is given that we should not discard or not neglect or put to one side those that we don't like, that are difficult to get on with, or that have really committed horrible crimes. We should instead train ourselves to generate genuine compassion to them as a special practice, as outlined in verse number 4. Right, so here it is said at the bottom of page 283, except for the awakening mind, the Buddhas do not uphold any means. So, in other words, the method that we're applying here is the method of the awakening mind, the method for attaining enlightenment. There's, in a sense, it's saying there's a single method. We know from the, for instance, the three main aspects of the path, or the fundamental aspects of the path, that there is renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view of emptiness. But here it's only talking about bodhicitta, the awakening mind. In a way, it's subsuming renunciation in the awakening mind. But that is fine, because the awakening mind includes the path. It is the great vehicle path. And we do accept that all three paths, all three vehicles, such as the hero, the solitary realizer, and the bodhisattva vehicles, all condense into the great vehicle, all eventually are subsumed by the great vehicle. So the path of renunciation itself is subsumed within the awakening mind here. But that's okay in the great vehicle, because they both arise in the mind of a practitioner together on the path of accumulation. Both the path itself, which is the mind of renunciation, because the definition of the path is the uncontrived mind the uncontrived mind of renunciation. So great compassion and bodhicitta have that, because that is the path. The awakening mind is the path itself. Anyway, there are some interesting debates that can be given in this regard. Right. So we'll just do a little bit on the fifth verse. So, fifth, our training to accept the defeat without harboring any resentment, even when faced with misfortunes such as slander and so on, is presented in the following. So here, if we're taking the position of others as supreme, that I'm the lowest of all, that I will practice with other beings. For instance, I would directly take on the afflictions and eliminate them. And also in the fourth verse, those of unpleasant character and those who are hard to get on with and have committed various negative deeds, I shall also generate compassion for them. By training in this way, then our compassion deepens. But still, there are situations that arise for us where we may really be offended by others. That what they say and do may be hard for us to bear. So in order to deal with those types of situations, then it is said in the fifth verse by Langri Tampa, when others out of jealousy treat me wrongly with abuse and slander, I shall train to take the defeat upon myself and offer the victory to others. So this is extremely difficult to practice. But it is, again, an essential form of practice leading to the development of great compassion within us. So we'll just read a little bit of the commentary. Regardless of whether we are to blame, if others slander us or speak ill of us out of jealousy or other motives, instead of harboring in resentment, we should respond with a gentle mind. It's extremely difficult for us to do, especially if we're not to blame. We feel this righteous anger towards anyone that would blame us for something we haven't done. When we're slandered, other people speak ill of us, and so on. Generally, we are shocked. Lola Pok, as is said in Tibetan, the mind is struck, takes our breath away, and we have to defend ourselves. Even in those situations, we should practice compassion. That compassion should be at the very forefront of our mind. And for this opportunity has arisen to generate a genuine mind of compassion. So as Geshe Chekawa advises, free of resentment, we should refrain from claiming, for instance, I'm innocent, others are to be blamed. Like Langri Tampa, we should take the defeat upon ourselves. It is said that whenever misfortunes befell another, he would say, I too am part of him. So that's a mark of the practice. If we're able to identify with others to the point we can say, I am that person. So really, this is a sign of gaining an understanding of selflessness, because there's just the experience there. And that experience could be just on me as well. It is, because just as I don't have, there's no truly existent self for me, there's no truly existent self for that other person, there's nothing really to differentiate us. So Langri Tampa said, I too am part of him. So when we engage in giving and ethical discipline. At present, we do so to purify our negative karma and accumulate merit. Right. Also, okay, we might just stop there for today. So we've just started on verse number 5, and still got a bit of text left. So I'm just wondering if there's any points that anyone wants to raise with the text so far. Please do so. It's good to. One of the great things that we do have is this group energy and group wisdom. And often what we need to know is already present in the wisdom of the people we know around us. And we can draw on this wealth of information and experience. So I'm just thinking if there's anything that comes up.
I like the idea that you had of when you talked about the Lama who was accused of something and he all went and offered up something. There's another study that they tell a lot about the one who was teaching and a woman comes up in the middle of his teaching and says, "Here's your son," right? And he just takes that. And I never thought, I always thought about it as, okay, this is a way to act. But I like what you said, where you said, you know what? Maybe I didn't do it this time, but if there's an infinite number of past lives, I may have done it in a past life, and now I still need to atone for that karma. So I really like that way of looking at
it. Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary behavior. You know, I remember that incident. I don't recall which. I think it was another Kadampa Lama that happened to. It might have been. Speaking of Langri Tangpa himself, but yeah, our normal reaction is to be righteously offended, and we almost feel as if we have an unlimited scope, therefore, to attack anyone that wrongly accuses us of something, and we use that anger to harm that person. Whereas Langri Tangpa, just for instance, he made offerings to the monks, and it appears he did not claim innocence or any other such thing. He was able just to rest with that and went into retreat. Now that's extremely difficult to do. If we were accused of that, well, it's actually a defeat for a monk, of course. And so your reputation could be absolutely shot through, even if it could be disproven. There would always be this accusation hanging over you. So your whole life could be destroyed by that one thing. And for him to make an offering and then go into retreat, there's those that could have said about him, "Oh, well, that proves he was guilty." He offered no defense. And when we think about it ourselves, we're still struggling with grudges about what people have said about us 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And we still haven't forgiven them. And we may not have had a chance at the time, to defend ourselves, but we still cling to oh, if I ever get the opportunity, I'm going to set the record straight. And so we haven't put it down. We can't put the issue down and give the victory to others. And even though we sit there and think, "Oh, I'll give the victory to others," I'll admit it. I'll say I'll give the victory to others 100 times. Maybe I'll get a bit closer to being able to do it, and so on. Still, the reality is we haven't got there yet. So having these examples is so important for us, and to really see how closely we can align ourselves with that attitude of forgiveness, giving the victory to others, take the defeat onto myself, and just live with that, to bear that. I mean, we know ourselves, in our family, we may be offended by what a family member tells us. And, it's the rare person that's able to just take the defeat on oneself without saying a thing about it. But this is the type of practice required for us in training the mind. We have to do this again and again and again, many times over, to begin to create the habit of this type of practice. So the wonderful kindness of having this type of a book, or this type of text that we can read, is that we can see, even in this text and other texts later, that these practitioners did make progress in the practice and did benefit immensely. So that can be very helpful for us. We need to remind ourselves of it, so that we have strength to sustain the practice in mind training for the rest of this life, and to try and increase it as we go along, and so on. Right, okay, well, I think we just comes up to the time. So we should do the final dedication prayer. And thank you everyone for coming, and take care until next week. I look forward to the final, we deal with the remaining verses.
Dedication prayers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. His Holiness the Dalai Lama long life prayer. The wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Swift return for His Holiness, swift return for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with the lineage masters, all the offers of refuge of the infinite lands, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you are the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed for peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, to the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta, of the children of victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Lama Tenzin Osuhita, Venerable One, to whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us, and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please, live long. Long life prayer for Geshe Chekawa, beloved teacher leading your students toward wisdom and compassion. Explain through exacting discernment the steps of the graduated path. You are the unequal guide. Please live a long and stable life.
Great. Thank you.